One of the things I wanted to talk about, because you're fifth graders, right?
Yes.
So I think it's really interesting to talk about how I got the idea for this book, because I actually got the idea for this book three ways. The first moment I actually thought of this book, I was in fifth grade. So it was kind of it took me about 40 years to finally write it, but has anyone been to the Statue of Liberty? Anyone gone there? So when I was in fifth grade, I went to the Statue of Liberty. And my family didn't really go very many places, so that was like kind of a big trip. And I remember getting there and thinking, whoa, it's huge, right? It's like amazing. By the way, there was no cable TV back then. There were no video games. There was none of it. So like going to see something like that was like, wow, it was like pretty exciting. And it still is. But so we got there, and did you guys climb up the stairs?
No.
Oh, you didn't get to climb up the stairs? Well, you climb up the stairs, and it's kind of cool. It's a winding staircase, and you get all the way to the top where the crown room is. And that's like, I don't know if you you can look out the windows where the crown is. It's like jewels inner crown of the windows. And there's like a little pyramid staircase that you get to climb up and look out. But the day I was there, it was so crowded. Like there was like this big guy standing in front of me, and you kind of get up there and you look out, and it was like the most amazing thing I ever saw, because you see like New York, you see the harbor, you can kind of see the ocean off in the distance. Everything's like laid out before you, but then you have to go right away because people are pushing, and there's a lot of people. And I remember thinking right then, man, that was legit. I really wanted to hang around more and see and be able to like just walk around and like take my time. And I thought it'd be really cool to be alone in the Statue of Liberty. I mean, totally alone, like no one else there, kind of hang out there, set things up. And so I kind of had that in my head. Then many years later, I became a writer. And I always wanted to write a story about immigration. Anyone's family like immigrants? So like my family were immigrants on both sides. My mother's side of the family actually settled in the Bronx. And my father's side, Bronx. Come on. My father's side were in Brooklyn. And they didn't, when they both sides of the family came over, they both came from Russia because they had to leave because they were being forced out. There was a lot of violence over there, and they didn't really have much choice. And they got over here. My grandfather, my father's father came over, my mother's father, came over, and he had nothing. Like no money. He had like one set of clothes, basically one jacket, but he had one thing that was like, and I actually brought the thing to show you guys. He had a little tiny pair of scissors. And the reason the scissors were important was he didn't have money, he didn't have anything, but he was like a tailor, he knew how to make buttonholes. Which back then there were no sewing, there were sewing machines, but if you wanted to make a hole, like a buttonhole like this, you needed a special pair of scissors to cut it and then sew it together, and that was a special skill. And my great-grandfather, he had this pair of scissors, so it was very valuable to him. That was the most valuable thing he had. And I remember thinking, wow, everyone's got a pair of scissors like this now, right? You all have pairs of scissors like this, but back then, that was like the whole thing for him. And he was able to get a job using that pair of scissors. And it always interested me that from that one pair of scissors, he was able to start a life for himself and start a family. And he sort of, my great-grandfather, they lived in one room. And then my grandparents, they lived in two rooms. And and then they, how they kind of made their way in America. And they didn't speak English, my great-grandparents. Does anyone have relatives who don't speak English? Yeah. And so my grandfather, who was kind of my hero, he was the guy who was I was closest to, he said it was really tough for him because his parents didn't speak any English, and he had to do everything for his parents, because he was born in the old country over in Russia, but he came here and he learned how to speak English right away. So he was the one, even when he was 5 years old, he was the one who was like buying things at the store. He was the one figuring out how to pay taxes. He was the one figuring out how to ride in the subway. And I always thought that was kind of cool that my grandfather was able to do that at a very young age. But I always kind of wanted to write a book about my great-grandparents and what it must have been like for them to come over with nothing, trying to figure it out. And then, but I couldn't think of an idea. Like I had no idea that that was good. Like I was like, you know, and then I wrote a couple books, and I was like, I still want to write something about that. And then I was reading a book about a singer named Dean Martin. Probably none of you ever heard of Dean Martin, but he's like an Italian singer who was pretty famous a while ago. And he was talking about his parents, and they were immigrants from Italy, and they didn't speak any English, and they came over. And one of the reasons they came over, and this is one of the things that they had in common with my grandparents, is the Statue of Liberty. Because the Statue of Liberty was famous and is famous all over the world because it stands for freedom and liberty and the ability to do not whatever you want, but the ability to do what you want to do, which is not true in most countries. And then I was reading that book, and I was really interested because they talk about the poem. You know, there's a famous poem which is in the book. You've heard that poem. Give me your tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. And that's a pretty powerful poem because it says that even if you're poor, even if you don't have anything, you can come here and be free. And that was cool. And that like meant something to Dean Martin, meant something to my grandparents. But I never really read the poem. So I went back and I read the poem, and I really liked this line: a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning. That's pretty cool. And her name, Mother of Exiles. So like, I thought that was cool. Does anyone know what an exile is? An exile is someone who is forced to leave somewhere. So she's the mother of exiles. The Statue of Liberty, you know, if you've got to go, if you've got to leave your country, the Statue of Liberty says, come on over. Like, you know, I'll be your mother. So that's when I had the idea. I was like, you know, I want to write a book about a girl who comes to America but loses her mother. And so the Statue of Liberty kind of becomes like her mother. And then she hides out in there, like I thought of when I was in 5th grade, and she has a pair of scissors. So all those things came together to form the beginning of the book for me. And that's how I came up with the idea for the book, but it took more than 40 years for it to all come together. But I've always been interested in immigration and like how people figure out their way in this country. And it's like, everyone's got a different path. And like, you know, I was talking to my memories of my great-grandparents and my grandparents in the Bronx. Then they moved to Washington Heights, and their building was torn down recently because it was a pretty crummy building. But, you know, it's interesting to see the journey that they had and to get to me. And my grandfather, who's my hero, he's the guy I looked up to most. He couldn't go to college. He's the one who translated for his parents, and he couldn't afford to go to college, and all he wanted was for me to go to college. That was the most important thing for him. It didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. I could do anything. He always said to me, like, whatever you do, I don't care as long as you go to college and get an education. So it was really interesting to sort of trace that journey. So, and I want to sort of talk about myself a little bit, like, because I think it's interesting, you know, like I speak to, you know, groups of kids your age, and I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they see a writer, they think, oh, this guy must be really smart, he must have been really good in school. But in fact, I wasn't very good in school. And when I was in 5th grade, particularly, I don't think anyone would have thought I was going to be a writer. I don't think anyone would have thought I would have done much of anything. Because I wasn't very good at school. I wasn't very interested in my subjects. I was really bad in math. I didn't read much. And then in about 5th grade, I had a teacher who like really started to pay attention to me and said, you know, I think you've got potential. I want to introduce you to the librarian who's going to find you books, you know, that maybe you'll like. And like, I would never read a book. I was like, I played basketball, I played sports, that was what I did. And like, I didn't really care. And then like this librarian who I never really, I was like, you know, at library, I used to just kind of sit there and pick my nose and not pay attention. She started to like ask me what I was interested in. And I was like, oh, you know, I kind of like stuff like sword fighting, you know, I like sword fighting and that kind of thing. So she started to give me books about that. Then she started to give me other books, and I was like, huh. And that's how I really started to read. And it was through this librarian in my elementary school and this one teacher. And I still wasn't a very good student, and I still wasn't writing very much because I was still into sports, and I was a guy, and most of the guys I knew were not into that. But slowly I got to be a better reader, and you know, I got to be a better student as the years went on, and I got better at reading. But it was interesting because when I go back and I see people from when I was in your age, they're like, I can't believe you're a writer. That's so weird, because it just wasn't me. And one of the reasons I bring that up is sometimes I think it's harder for boys also, because sometimes when you're a boy, and particularly if you're into sports, which I was, and my dad was a great athlete. My dad was like a serious athlete, played every sport, and I was pretty good, but I think when you're a boy and you feel that draw to do what your dad did, or just automatically, when really I was probably always better at writing than I was ever going to be at basketball. Even though I still like basketball and it was fun, but I think sometimes you got to sort of dare to imagine what you want to do and then just do it. And that's really been my story. My story was, again, I still didn't really do much with my writing until way after, until I was a grown-up. And part of that was because, I didn't think it was me. I didn't think it was really me. And I'm really glad I finally did that, but I wouldn't wait too long. If you guys have a dream or want to do something, earlier you start, the better. That's really what it's all about. So anyway, I wanted to basically leave as much time as possible for questions about the book. I don't, if you guys have some, because the last time we had way too many and we couldn't answer them all. So, you guys want to go with questions? Yeah.
Why did you start the book with a dream?
Well, why did I start with a book with a dream? That's a good question. I mean, that book, that is actually what really happened to her. So she's kind of having a nightmare and remembering what happened to her family. And it's sort of it's a little dreamy, but that part of it is, that's why she left Russia, because they had to. What happened in that dream, and it was a dream, was based in reality. And it's sort of just, I wanted you all who are reading the book to know why she left and why she had to come to America. Yeah?
So the dream is a vision, what happened in the future or what happened in the past?
It was what happened in the past. It was what happened in the past, and those kind of things, when really bad stuff happens, it sticks with you. If you see, and that's what happened to her. She saw her father get killed, and so she was haunted by that probably all her life. Way in the back.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well, it was a lot of things. Probably most because of my great-grandparents and trying to sort of get in touch with that and hold on to that and understand. And again, one of the things that's going on now is there's a lot of conversation about immigration. There's a lot of people talking about all the kids. I was very interested in all the kids coming from Mexico and coming from Central America, because those kids that are coming from Central America, they're coming because they have to come, because it's very dangerous there. And there are drug gangs there that are really making things tough for them. And I thought to myself, wow, that's exactly the same reason my family came. And I made a connection. So that was one of the reasons why I got really excited to write it right now, because a lot of people are talking about immigration and have certain feelings about it. But I think, wow, this is one of the things that's great about America, is you can come here and be safe. Yeah, you.
When you were young, was there really a girl in the march?
No, there wasn't. That's something I made up. You in the purple sweater.
Did you have a new life?
What'd you say?
Did you have a new life?
Did I have a new life? I mean, my life, yeah, I think compared to what my family had, I definitely had a new life. And I was talking to my daughter the other day about that, and it was because when my mom grew up, and I was staying with her family, my grandparents slept in the living room. They had a pull-out, and the kids slept in the bedroom. They had one bedroom, and I was like, well, now they have a bedroom. So I feel like I do have a new life, and I have, when I look at our life and my family's life, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, because that's my memory, and it was great, but it was different. Yeah, you.
Why did she have so much confidence when she had to go to the very long
When she what?
When she had to go to the very long boat to jump in the water?
Well, I think she had confidence because, a couple reasons. One is confidence is that she knew how to swim. So her dad had taught her how to swim, so she felt something, I can do this. The other thing is she really didn't feel like she had any choice. She really didn't want to stay on the boat. and she wanted to get to America. She knew, that's what her mother wanted. So part of it was she was confident that she knew how to swim, and she was probably pretty stupid because that was very dangerous. But she also felt like, wow, I really don't want to go back there.
Finish his answer before you finish his
Oh,
answer.
sorry. Yeah,
Why did you choose the name the girl in the fridge?
that's a good question. Someone else asked me that. That's because I thought it sounded kind of cool, that's it, and I thought that the idea of her, she meets Merrick, the security guard, and he goes up there and looks out, and then she goes up there with her child, and I just like this, I feel like the torch is a symbol, the light, that's where the light is, and that's a symbol of freedom to everybody, so I wanted her, to sort of paint an image of her close to the light, yeah. What inspired you to become
What inspired me to come
Oh, yeah, I always, from the time I started reading, I would come to a library or something and look at these books and just think, wow, that's amazing. I'd love to be able, and I love stories, and it was something I really enjoyed. It was something I really enjoyed. But I always look at it and say, wow, how cool would it be to have my own book one day and be able to tell a story that might interest you guys. But again, I didn't even write a book until I was 35, which is pretty old to start. Yeah.
Why didn't you create siblings for Sarah the story?
What's the question?
Why didn't you create siblings for Sarah the story?
That's a good question. I think that's a really smart question because a lot of people ask, a lot of characters in stories are orphans. Harry Potter and Sarah now is an orphan. And I think when I didn't want to complicate it with having a brother or sister because then she'd be trying to find her brother and sister the whole time and connect with them. And I wanted it really just to be about her figuring it out on her own. But I feel like if she had a brother or sister who was back in Russia or something, she'd try and go back there. And if she had them with her, she'd just be trying to protect them. And that would have changed the story. But that's a good question. Yeah.
What was your favorite chapter about
My favorite part? Have you guys gotten the end?
Yes.
Some.
Well, I like the end. I like the end of the book, where she's saying goodbye to people. Because that, for me, is really shows how much, she's grown and things have changed. Yeah.
Why did you put so much